Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Ask me almost anything. My name is Glenn Gers, and I come to you live Tuesdays and Thursdays, if I can make it, at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone. I am teaching screenwriting here on YouTube. The main way that you can learn screenwriting or writing for screens from me is by going to my channel page, the main one. Here's a little screen capture of that. On that channel, the first 3 playlists: Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. Okay, these are little 10-minute lessons, little videos that I have worked out on various topics. There's no grand order, there's no grand scheme. You just take any 10-minute lesson, try and get a sense of the things I have to tell you there. The topic is always right in the thumbnail. Genre, flashbacks, dramatic action, whatever it is, I've tried to distill down what I have learned in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies into useful, practical things to try. Not everything is going to work for everybody. Everybody has to find their own way of doing things. There is no right or wrong way to write. There is no right or wrong thing to write. It's just a question of what you're trying to accomplish and what abilities and skills and interests you have. That's all for you to figure out. I'm just trying to give you some tips. They are free. They are available 24/7 for all of you. So that's the main thing. Then twice a week I come on here. Sometimes I have a topic to talk about. Sometimes I just answer questions. Today I am going to do a little of both. Good morning, Donna in Australia. Hello, Nathan. Hi, Thendral, Morbo, and Gig McFish. Good evening, good morning. Hello to the entire world of people who are so gracious as to come talk to me. Today's topic, the first one that I'm going to drop in, then we're going to be open to a free-for-all of questions. But first, I want to talk about this question. What is the future of film? Now, I have to confess, no one actually asked me this question. This is provoked by a couple of articles that I read online this week. The first one I was steered to Paul Schrader, the filmmaker. He has a Facebook feed where he has his opinions on things. He talked about this article called TikTok, Can, and the Future of Film by a guy named Roy Price. It's a Substack. I put the links to all these articles down below in the description here. But a couple of days ago, this guy, Roy Price, who I think actually used to run a studio, I think he may have run Disney, he wrote this big essay on what's called TikTok, Can, and the Future of Film. The other one is by, and I do not know how to pronounce this name, Zeynep Tufekci. I believe. She's a columnist, she's a professor and a columnist for the New York Times. So the link is to a New York Times article, which may only be accessible for people who have subscriptions. I think they give you 1 or 2 free per month. Anyway, she wrote an article titled, What Would Plato Say About ChatGPT? Both of those articles are linked below, but you do not need to read them to be here to talk about it. I just wanted to start because they both have essentially an interesting thing that I think to say that I think is very, very important and accurate. Going to just briefly talk to Michael. I saw the first half of Disfigured. It's my neurosurgeon telling me there's no guarantee for complete recovery. It's a matter of perspective. Only you can determine your success. That is a fact of life. That is true. Yeah, we're global gathering here. Hello, Najo. Thank you, Michael, for watching the first half of Disfigured. When you watch the second half, I'll be interested to know what you feel about the experience, halves and halves. Hello, Magic Internet Movie, etc. Hello, Eva Lazar. Thank you. Good evening, Quicknet. I am glad you're able to watch it live too. Welcome all of you. So let's talk about these articles. They are linked in the descriptions. TikTok, Can, and the Future of Film. What would Plato say about ChatGPT? Okay, Roy Price in the the hello 1 million diamonds. Roy Price's point in his article is that there is an older generation, my generation, frankly, who are holding power in the media. This is natural, or has been natural up to now, in that older generations tend to have built the media. They tend to, or the politics, or everything. I mean, we've got older generations running politics. In general, what happens is people get to their positions of power in midlife, usually. And then they hold on to them. And Roy Price's point, and I agree with it, is they should stop. They should stop holding on to it. They should let go and let younger people run things, because they no longer understand what's going on. The world is changing. The medium is changing. The art form itself is changing. And therefore, no matter how beautiful and valuable us old folks' understanding of the art is, it is over. And it is time to see where it is going next. Tufekci's point is similar, not about the arts, it's about teaching. She's talking about ChatGPT. It's a new AI who's been released recently. Is very controversial because basically you can ask it a question and it will essentially write a rather good essay in answer, using completely artificial intelligence, scanning the entire world of the web and pulling in information, synthesizing it, and writing a little, apparently fairly well-written and coherent argument about whatever question you ask it. The problem is, she says, that it can write a fairly convincing wrong answer. And the only way you would know that is if you were already expert in the field. She's talking about this in terms of how are schools going to handle this, because currently a student can go on the internet, essentially ask an AI a question, get an essay in response. It will be an original work by that AI, and they can pass it off as their own. Her point is that the point of writing essays is not to write the essay. It's to learn the skills of finding information, figuring out what information is true or false or relevant, and putting it into a form that others can understand. That process, and you know me, guys, process is the name of the game as far as I'm concerned. Her point is, what's important is the process, and therefore, but that does not mean you should ignore the internet. You should not, as schools are currently trying to do. They are trying to shut out they're saying, you're not allowed to look at the internet when you write your essay, which is essentially like saying to anyone in the 20th century or before, you're not allowed to go to the library. That's just crazy. Her point is, apparently people are doing something called flipping, in which you are allowed to use the internet, but then you outside of class, but then you have to write the essay in class, and often talking about it or sharing pieces about it. The point is that the process is what is being taught. Now, so her point, once again, just like Roy Price's, is technology is changing our culture, certainly our business, our world, but especially the arts. It is changing. And the result is not that you should hold on to the old things and import them into the new technology. The new technology is not just a different dish to put the same thing in. The actual meaning of the art is going to change, just like the culture itself. The contents of the culture are changing. And everyone who says, oh, it's all the same thing in a new form. Oh, we had rebels back in the 1950s. Oh, we had rebels back in the 1700s. It is actually changing. Just like, frankly, in the 1700s and the 1950s, things actually did change. My point is that especially in the industry, you get people saying, the old Hollywood ways will always work. They are universally true. And as I hope you guys know from now about my feeling is, ain't no such thing as universally true in the arts, in creative work. Every moment has its own art form. And these are changing. There's 2 videos I did about this topic that might be helpful. The first is called Career Advice Amid Chaos, where I analyze a bit how it's changing, give you my advice on that, and also just 4 things you need to know, which is basically just saying in order to be an artist, you need to be open to changes. You need to be open to figuring out where you fit in the ongoing changing universe that we are in. So let's just talk for a little bit about the future of film. By the way, what people say when they talk about film is theatrical motion pictures. And that's what's interesting, is because theatrical motion pictures as we knew it are over. They are no longer the center of the culture. They will be, I'm sure that theatrical features will continue to go on, just like Broadway theater, which was for a while in America the center of an intellectual culture, the high point, the everyone had to be there. That's where the culture was associated. Now, honestly, most of Broadway is a bunch of stuff that most in the country sees. It's mostly for tourists. It's a big spectacle most of the time. Theater, as we know it, has moved to other places. So my point is that, I believe, is what is going to happen to theatrical motion pictures. People will still want to go to see movies on a screen. It's fun. Especially big movies, cool. They will also want to go see little tiny movies in little tiny theaters. That's also fun. These are all good things. They will no longer be the center of the business or the culture. They will be a thing that some people like to do, like some people like to go to classical music concerts and some people don't. The main stream of the culture is streaming and will be going to different devices. Now, there is a reason that I called this channel Writing for Screens. I did not call it screenwriting. I did not want to imply that you were going to be writing for movie theaters or even for TV as we know it. The truth is there are a lot of different screens. There's tablets, there's phones, there's watches, there's going to be goggles of various sorts. All of those are legitimate screens, and all of them can be legitimate art forms. Video games and comic books that are on tablets are all going to be blending together with the art forms that we know. And it is really important that artists recognize the new thing and try to figure out their place in that, to try and open up new ways to do it, because that's the most exciting thing about this technology. Don't be confused between the differences between business and art. Business and art are different. The business may go on churning out things that are actually dying art form for a while. They'll be like Wile E. Coyote running off the cliff, running in thin air for a while, then it's going to fall. Just like every art form eventually does. If you think about radio, there was a period in the early 20th century where, I apologize, our neighbor's gardener has a really loud machinery. Radio was the first mass medium. It came up at the same time as film, slightly earlier and slightly bigger for a while at least. Radio, the thing about radio was it was in everybody's home. They developed art forms for radio, some of which were silly art forms, but a lot of them were strong and powerful, but they were real. And it was a central cultural thing. And then as movies and television built up, radio died away. Now there is a form of radio, but it is no longer, it's a way to get some music and some news and people arguing politics. But it is no longer what it was. Just like opera, theater, serialized novels in magazines, all of those things were, for a while, for a generation or two, the center of culture. I'm not even sure where the center, if culture is going to have a center. It could be that with the internet, we're going to have to reckon with what happens when culture is decentralized, when there are a lot of cultures and none of them is the one. I believe that is probably what is happening. And it's important to figure it out because for a good deal of the past few centuries, Western culture was under the belief that they were the center of culture. They weren't. There are lots of other cultures out there, but because they had the guns and the money, they were the center of culture that, as far as they could tell, and they made everyone else feel like, well, they must be doing something right. They got the guns and the money. So what's happening now is that understanding of culture, which lasted for hundreds of years, but was only a passing phase, is passing. So my point about this is I am urging you to think about how you can break into a new form of what you are doing that you can do directly, that you don't have to wait for some giant corporation that is clinging to the old idea of a bestseller. Like if you want to write a book, there are only a handful of publishers in the English world, and only a handful of their books become bestsellers. It used to be that was a big deal. Now it's like blockbuster movies or anything else. It's a big deal of a small part of the culture. It's a big financial deal. It's a big business deal. But the truth is, it is no longer important like it used to be. And it might be really cool for you to figure out ways to do something that will be seen maybe on phones. Maybe you'll do something that people can check because everyone has YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and things on their phone. Do something that works through that form so that they can get to you, that you can get to them, so that you can create in a form that will reach the public directly from you. How to monetize that? Not our problem right now. Yes, it will be lovely to figure out how to monetize things. If you are just in the arts for money, give it up. Okay? Yeah, go into the game, try and write the next Marvel movie. But my point is, there is another thing happening here. And that thing is, I believe, in the next 5 to 10 years, going to topple all the known forms of entertainment that we are currently banking on as how to get rich and famous. So let's just think for a moment about what you can do with the tools that are immediately available to you right now. Never before in the history of humankind have there been so many easily available tools for you to create art and distribute it to other people. It is unbelievable. So what I would say is everybody thinks the job of artists is finding and explaining and proving the next big thing. But it's not. You're making it. If you make a thing and it catches on, it will become the next big thing. When they started movies, they did not know that they were going to take over the culture. They were just trying to give people some kicks and explore an art form and make some money. Yes, and they figured out how to do that and it took over. Just like radio and everything else. There will be a wave of new things and you can be part of making that what it is. Find a way to use the new technology, which is currently in the grips of old people who do not recognize that they are done. Okay? And there are wonderful lessons to be learned from the past. You should definitely understand the past work of storytellers on screens and off screens, painters and poets and musicians and comic book artists and everybody else. But it's a new thing is happening right now. And the future of it is to be figured out by you. Okay? Find your place. Will you necessarily be the next D.W. Griffith? Will you take over the world? Will you be the one who makes all the money? Probably not. But that's not the point. The point is you might have a really good time making art that people react to, and maybe you can even make some money at it. Who knows? Okay, let's get some comments here. I was going to ask you about ChatGPT. Then I said, I'll wait to see if you... Yes, I did. Here's the thing. It is apparently not impossible that AI will write good stories fairly soon. That is what I am reading about. Just like AI is making some nice looking pictures. Absolutely. That's not the only that, but the fact that an AI can do that does not mean that is art. It is art in the same way that it creates a thing, but the idea of art, first of all, is partly for the artist. In other words, just because someone else can do it, possibly do it better than you, doesn't mean you shouldn't be an artist. Okay? Having AI that can do your art faster or cheaper does not mean that you should not do your art. It also does not mean that people should not like your art. And what's more, it won't mean that. Because just because AI can do art doesn't mean that they're going to do art that is the right art. Okay? Nobody knows, and no one will ever know what the right art is. What is the art that will be popular? First of all, that will change every 5 minutes, as it always has. And second of all, popular isn't the only value to art. So therefore, it's really important to remember that this is not a contest. It is not a business, okay? You are not trying to optimize for the most sales. You are trying to make art that communicates something from you to someone else. That's the game. Whether or not you can get paid for that or get important for that is always, for every artist, the problem they are trying to wrestle with while doing their art. It is not art. That issue of whether or not you're going to be influential, or whether or not you're going to be paid, or whether or not you're going to be thrown out of the culture are all things that are essentially not within your control. You can't tell what the result of your work will be. You try, you do the best you can, you aim for something, but you can't make that happen. So my point about ChatGPT is, yeah, that's nice. That's like saying, I'm sure there will be, well, let's put it this way. They've now got filters that can make your face look nicer. Okay? They've got filters that can make your eyes look bigger and your lips look bigger. And now everybody on Instagram looks the same. Can you come up with a filter that will make everyone look a little different? Sure. Will that be true? No. Will that be an honest picture? No. Will it be a pretty picture? Maybe. It might very quickly become a boring picture. Just like, there's that guy who does the paintings of little cottages in the woods who became an enormous, I can't remember his name, but he became an enormous fad. Everyone loved these paintings of little cottages in the woods, and they were very pretty. And that's great. And I don't think they're a bad thing. I think they're a dead end. Any art, Jackson Pollock, genius painter, dead end, okay? All art is a dead end because it's just one person's work. And while it may feed and inspire other people, they've got to find their version of it. So ChatGPT is just a tool. I'm not even sure that it's a useful tool for artists. Honestly, a lot of these things that people are all hyped up about, it's because they're not artists and they don't understand what art is. And while they might want to see, that's like saying, reality TV shows are taking over from scripted TV shows, which for a short while there, everyone was afraid that was going to be true. It's not, because no matter how entertaining reality TV shows may be for a while, they're not the same as scripted art. And people want scripted art. And they will always want the new scripted art that applies to their world, and the old art will never do that. And so we're always going to be needing new artists and new art. If we stop, then we stop and culture becomes a thing without art. I'm not sure that that's ever going to happen because I don't believe it ever has happened. But it's not impossible, actually, that there may be cultures that have no art whatsoever. I don't know, because even the ones that only have some sticks and some stories, they still tend to carve the sticks in interesting ways, and they still tend to make up stories. So, I don't know. That's my take on ChatGPT is that it's a piece of technology which has very limited meaning to art and artists. The place that it may have meaning is with visual AI. You're finding artists who are losing jobs because someone can just say, oh, I need a picture of a teacup for my article. And so they're not hiring an illustrator to do the teacup. That's a real problem that has to be figured out. The owners of AI may have to figure out some way in which that is paid. because that is a legitimate copyright question. Hi, Hofner. Good evening. Michael says, many felt the 70s generation of block movies was going to destroy the entire industry. Yes, and in a way it did. In a way, it's an interesting thing because that generation was actually only like 6 years. It was very, very short, but very, very powerful. It did actually break up in many ways the creative direction of film, which was very narrow at that point. It broke it open. It has never closed back up. What didn't change was the business form in which that was being sent out. And very quickly, the business form recognized that there wasn't that much money in art. Art films, studio art films, only lasted about 5 or 6 years because people didn't really want to go to the theater to see them. A small number did, but most people didn't. And so they started to make movies that were more entertaining. However, those entertaining films started to absorb the art film methods and vision, and that has produced some pretty cool results. Hi, iCookMe. Nice to meet you. Hello, Kestrel. How does one write a story when one has nothing to say? What inspires you? What gets you going? That is an interesting question. I actually think I've discussed it a little before, but I'm happy to discuss it again. Let me just run through some of I've missed some questions. Let me get to them, and then I will come back to this. I will. The key to AI is human and AI collaboration. Yes, exactly. That is completely right, Michael Box. Thank you. And I'm just determining what's right and wrong because it's my show. I would agree that the medium changes constantly, but still, it's about the craftsmanship that people will appreciate. And that is true, but remember, there will come a time when craftsmanship will change definition. In other words, there was a time when studio Hollywood craftsmanship, which is rather suffocatingly clean, was recognized and considered the minimum. Like you couldn't, they honestly believed that people would not be able to watch a movie with jump cuts or shaky cameras. Then the 70s happened, the 50s through the 70s happened. People recognized that those bad craftsmanship, because that's what it was considered at the time, actually had an authenticity that the stuffy studio system didn't have. And that language became part of craftsmanship. So whenever someone says, craftsmanship will always be real, the fact of people being craftsmen, yes, the craftspeople, the use of craft will continue to be part of art. What defines craftsmanship? Always changing. Hey, I hope you're feeling better. Flying over trout. Please drink plenty of fluids. If you get bad, Paxlovid supposedly really helps. Please do take it easy. Thomas Kincaid, thank you. Thomas Kincaid, that's the painter I was talking about who did the little cottages. Yes. Yeah, exactly. That is it. It's glowing with light. Very beautiful. They're pretty paintings. I'm not taking them down. Okay, I'm going to stack up my questions and get to them. I have problems writing humor in scripts. Can you tell me how you do it in a nutshell? Humor everyone would enjoy. Humor is extremely perspective. How can I be honest in my work? Great question. Hello, Roddy. Just going to quickly run through these, make sure I'm catching up. Marvel genre, superheroes took off, but at some point comes, yes, exactly. Go back to better stories? No, I don't know that it's bad. I don't know that it's good or bad. It's just different. We are always going to want a wider range. That's the truth, Peter. I agree with you. Marvel Supers took off as a business model, and many of those films are truly great. Fabulous, fabulous movies, but they only apply to one set of values. And even now they are wrestling with that because they're saying, can we do a superhero movie where it doesn't end in fighting? Because one of the problems with superhero movies is they're based in fighting. And all of the action sequences and all of the conflicts come down to fights. That fighting is not the only human activity. So therefore, we're going to want a movie about the other ones. So the answer is constantly, you'll be surprised. I believe that eventually there will be superhero, people are working on this. Actually, what's interesting is they're trying to have it both ways, trying to continue to have the fighting, but question it or discuss different values. Peacemaker, Peacemaker on DC. It's on HBO Max. Peacemaker. It's an amazing character study with a lot of interesting characters and brilliant filmmaking with all the genre stuff. Likewise, The Boys. The Boys is a fascinating attack on the genre using the genre. Anyway. Yes, exactly. The movie La Jetée is made up of stills. There is no there's no absolute set of rules as to what constitutes a movie. Okay, I think the medium of the art is not relevant if you want to do your art on cave walls and go, exactly. I agree with that, Morbo. Okay, let me go back to some of the questions that we had here. Okay, Kestrel, he asked, what do you do when if you have nothing to say? You don't have nothing to say. But honestly, you surely have something to say because you have some desire to write. If you have some desire to write, you must have something in there. Tell me a little bit more about what it is you want to write. By the way, if all you want to do is play in the playground that you like consuming in, that's how I started. That's how most artists start. Okay, most artists start getting interested in art because they enjoy consuming the art and they have this weird need to do some of it themselves. We now have a whole set of fan fiction in which people are doing that without breaking out into their own artistic creations. I like that. I think that's cool. But I do think that they, frankly, would get more satisfied. It's harder. But if they had tried an original thing instead of the fan fiction, because otherwise, what every artist does when they start is fan fiction. Okay, when the Beatles started, they were doing fan fiction of Buddy Holly and a bunch of 1950s rockabilly folks, and then slowly but surely they developed their own voices and their own style through the work. Likewise, Ray Charles. When Ray Charles started out, what he really wanted to do was imitate Nat King Cole. Now, Nat King Cole is amazing, but what Ray Charles found was that he actually had other things in him that needed to be worked out, and you can't just do your art by imitating. But imitating is an absolutely fabulous way to start. So, Kestrel, if there is a form of art that you like, and all you want to do is do that, cool. Just do it and see how you do it. And just practice, at very least, get your skills going, work up your skills. But then the question is, what inspires you? What inspires me is a never-ending flow of everything that comes at me. What gets me going is weird. I am literally every day, every minute, I am seeing stuff and going, ooh, that would be, I want to do that. I want to work with that. I want to deal with that. Different people are different. Whenever I read an article in a newspaper, there's something about somebody, sell a vendor at the World Cup and what it's like to be them. I start to think, well, what is that life like? What is it like for different people to have their lives? And what stories come out of that? Just how I work. What inspires some people is a political argument. What inspires other people is an emotion that they are trying to grasp onto for themselves. And sometimes the best way to grasp onto it yourself is to put it in a form that you can show others. Tell me more about yourself, Kestrel, and I will try and help with that. But the answer basically is, if for some reason you have an interest in writing a story, think of, and this is really a question of ask questions. I have 2 videos that might help you. Actually, more than 2. You should really, I got to say, you seem like someone who would use well my whole first 3 playlists. I beg you to check them out. But also, especially, use what you have because you got something already. Okay, if you're here, you've got something. But also, process of questions. That's really, really a useful one for this. And take art apart. Look at the stuff you like, whatever inspires you. If what inspires you is in art, find that. If it's in life, think about what form you want to express whatever it is. I don't know you well enough to know the answer of what inspires you. I know that the answer to what inspires anyone is, it's everybody's different. And what's more, everybody changes over time. For a long time, all I wanted to do was spy stories and murder mysteries. And then actually I read some books and saw some movies that were different. And I was like, wow, I want to do that. I read some John Updike. I read Rabbit Run and The Centaur, and they knocked me out. Graham Greene. So I suddenly started to think about stories about everyday life. And what happens is, if you are in the business of doing stuff, you'll keep finding new ways to do it, and you'll keep finding new subjects to do it. That's really, really the truth of art. Is you don't run out of stuff if you like doing the stuff. I have to tell you, I believe, Kestrel, that when somebody says, I have nothing to say, that is an indicator that you are being unbelievably hard on yourself. That you are, in fact, absorbing some critical view that you believe others will have, and you are being critical of yourself before you even do the thing, which is insane, because you can't criticize a thing that doesn't exist yet. But what you're doing is saying, that won't be good enough if I do it. No one can ever create when they are thinking, it won't be good enough if I do it. The only way to know if it's going to be good enough or not, and good enough is, by the way, a very adjustable thing that you should think about adjusting, but you can't possibly know how good something will be until you actually do it. And when you do it, if it's not good enough, the answer is do it better. Do a new one and make a little part of it better. That's how you solve that. But when you say, I have nothing to say, I just don't believe you. I believe that you must have something to say, because there is no human being on earth that has nothing to say. Even people who literally have no voice that can have things to say. Okay. The Watchmen, best comic movie ever? You mean the Snyder version, or the I actually, Snyder version is beautiful and well done and based in a phenomenally interesting and bizarre book. I kind of like the series better. There's a limited series, a 10-episode Watchmen, which is sort of it's not an adaptation. It's a taking those people and putting them in a new story, and it's really good. When I was a freshman, we shot Super 8 shorts and screened in a classroom. Yes, that is really, really a good point. And now that can be, you could start your own film festival. Okay, this is a little story. Important story. Sundance Film Festival. Let's remember, Sundance Film Festival was invented because there was no place for American independent films at the time. There were film festivals in other countries, and there was the New York Film Festival, which tended to import other films, but there was not a real place for independent American film in the late 70s or early 1980s. But American independent film was starting to happen because of the breakdown of the studio system and the opening up of other financial ways of distributing stuff. So what happened was, Robert Redford said, wow, I'm a rich, famous actor who actually likes independent film. I'm going to do something about this, which is freaking genius. And you got to give Redford a lot of credit for this. People forget. They think of him as this icon of a certain kind of acting, and he's frankly a great actor at what he does. But he invented the American Film Festival, the American Indie Film Festival, which now there's hundreds of them. And so what happened was, these film festivals started, and people started to show little indie films. But what happened was, very quickly, the industry glommed onto that, and they started to make it very competitive, very hard to get into. And so this guy named Dan Mervish and another guy, I can't remember, they made a movie called Omaha, and they couldn't get into Sundance, so they started another festival at the same time in the same town. They just rented a little place, a hall, and they started Slam Dance. The Slam Dance Festival was people who couldn't get into Sundance, and they held it during Sundance, at Sundance, and they said, hey, anybody want to see these? And it became its own major indie festival. You don't know what will happen if you try. I mean, they were doing this partly as an act of rebellion and partly as a way to get seen for their own work. But they started a thing which now it's in itself a major thing, a major festival. My point is, as Michael said, make some little things, write some little things, make a form to put them in. There's a thing called zines. In the 1960s and 70s and 80s, comic artists who were not doing conventional superhero stuff had no place to put their art. It was very frustrating for them, like the people who couldn't get into Sundance. They said, you know what, we're going to use Xerox machines and make our own comics and put them in little indie shops and sell them by mail and hand them out on the street corners. And there became a burgeoning independent comics form, which created what are now graphic novels and independent comics, which are amazing. Okay, my point is, as it was at the Future of Film here, we are in a place where for the first time that has become a global possibility. You can put your comic on the internet and people that you would never physically be able to get to can possibly get it. Is that a whole other deal? Is it a whole other difficult thing to do? Sure. But you know what? You're going to find someone who wants to set that thing up, and they're going to set it up and you can be just part of it. All I'm saying is, please try to recognize the independent ability that is happening now is new, and don't get hung up on the standard business model. Okay. Hi, Kestrel. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I guarantee you, get into the habit of doing the thing. Please do. I got to say, Kestrel, you should be looking at these 3 playlists, but especially the bottom one. The bottom one is about being a writer. It's about the dealing with those issues, but also just there's the one about brainstorming, and here it's called brainstorming and scrap piles. These will all help you get into the habit of art, even if you have nothing to say, because you have something to say. Oh wait, before I go any further, I got to answer Thendrel's question. Thendrel asked a question about humor. Okay. Thendrel says, I'm having a problem writing humor in scripts. Well, first of all, you don't have to. Maybe you're a person who doesn't write humor. You know, that's cool. Not a problem. Maybe you're just somebody who writes serious stuff. The question of how can you have humor that everyone would enjoy? Like with, I have to tell you guys always, if I'm not around and you have a question, the answer to your question is in your question. So just write your question down and you'll see the answer in there. Just like where Kestrel said, I have nothing, my problem is I have nothing to say. The answer's right in there. You do have something to say. the question your question, okay? Why do you think you have nothing to say? In this case, why do you think there is any humor that everyone would enjoy? There is no such thing. Humor among all the artistic forms is the most unlikely to please a large number of people. It's just no humor everyone likes. That's the humor is hard, as supposedly Oscar Wilde and a bunch of other people said. Dying is easy, humor is hard, comedy is hard. The trick is, what do you think is funny? And then just try it out. There's only one way to see if something is funny to other people, and that is to try it out. Put it in your script. See if anyone laughs. By the way, I can tell you, I have often, I remember when I did Fracture, I put in one line that I thought was really funny. The villain is giving a speech in court. He's defending himself in court, and he gives a speech about how this crime happened, and in fact, he sort of looks on himself as the victim. Now, he shot his wife in the head, and I just put in many ways a victim myself. I just put that little phrase in one of his speeches, and I thought that was hilarious because it was so gross. It was so manipulative and evil. It was funny because it was just an awful, awful thing to say. And nobody ever got it. Nobody in the production got it. Anthony Hopkins got it. He knew it. He knew the joke. And I remember once I was at a screening because I was going to do the Q&A afterwards, and I was in there, and this one person laughed out loud at that line, and I was like, yes. Okay, I saw that in at least a dozen screenings. Only once did someone laugh, one person laughed at that line. Is that bad humor? I don't think so. I still think it's a good joke. You have to try it out and see. Hello, Roddy. Oh, I think I've already got that. Okay, so the answer is, how do you put humor in? Try it. You may or may not be good at humor. Humor is essentially a gift, a talent, a thing that you have a certain ability to do. However, very often you could just have the wrong audience. Try it on different groups of people. Try it within your work. See it. But honestly, if you're feeling like your humor is not working, that's different from I feel like I can't figure out what humor is. Humor is whatever you think is funny. And the question is how many other people will think it's funny. And the question is how important is that? Because while it's nice to have humor in scripts, it's not the end of the world if you don't have it. See how it goes for you. G'day. Hi, Ad Hoc Art. Nice to meet you. Getting kids ready for school. Okay, cool. By the way, love that your icon is dynamite. I'm a huge Avatar: The Last Airbender fan. The original series, not the live action movie, and not the James Cameron movie. But anyway, so I want to write 2 stories that interweave into it. How would you approach that? I will tell you. Okay, the question is, how do you write interwoven stories? First of all, look for a recent Ask Me Anything, which was how do you write subplots, because that's kind of the answer. Essentially, you are just telling 2 different stories, but one of the best ways I could do it, look at this video, Building Character Arcs, because in that, what essentially I'm trying to show you is that what you're doing is you're plotting each story individually and then plotting how the stories interact. You need to do both things. You need to both figure out how one story affects the other. If they interweave and don't affect each other, okay, cool. Then there's a thematic reason that you're telling 2 stories. But usually when stories interweave, they also interact. And you have to figure out what those key spots are where that happens. But mainly what you're doing is essentially outlining each story separately and then merging the 2 outlines, or you sort of go back and forth on this. You do a little of the big outline, and then sometimes you pull out one outline and you say, okay, well, for them, what's their story? And then you go back to the other, what's their story? You keep walking through their stories as an outline. So that is my advice. Hope that is helpful. Hello, Eva. Let's see. Eva, your answer to this helps us all. Yes, good. Yes, also right, yeah, small steps, short pieces, do little bits, and then get the satisfaction of finishing something. Yes, absolutely. Eva is giving you very useful advice. Everybody should listen to it. It is important to have limited, practical goals. Things that you can say, okay, I want to write the great American novel. I should start by writing the great American sentence. And then I should start by writing a sentence. Maybe it's great, maybe it's not. Maybe it's American, maybe it's not. The point is, you don't get to the end result. You take the process. Small steps. I am just selling my own stuff. I beg you people, watch all my videos. They all talk about this in great pithy detail with graphics. Yes, there are many student film festivals. There are many ways. Yes, rented a theater in his hometown. Exactly. There is the history of art is the history of people figuring out ways to get their art out there. The Impressionists, famously, Impressionist painters, now one of the most important movements in modern art, in the history of art, they could not get shown in galleries or museums because they were locked in by a very strict representational art field in France called the Academy. And so they opened up their own show, their own gallery. It was called the Salon de Refusés, which meant, or sorry for my French accent, but what it meant is the people who have been rejected, the people who have been refused, we're going to have our own gallery. Screw you guys. Slam dance. That's how it works. Cool. I am glad. So you know the scene I'm talking about then. One thing to do, one thing is, do you ever get to choose the names of your characters you're writing about? And if so, do you have any tips on picking the names of characters? That's a good question. Do you ever get to, yes, you get to choose all the names of all the characters in everything you write until somebody is paying money. And then they may ask you to change names because of legal restrictions. But otherwise, yes, you always choose the names. How do you pick the names? It's a mixture. First of all, you have to think about what the name, how the name represents the person. In other words, if this person is from a certain country or culture, their name should represent that. So if this person is from, Latvia, or this person is from Argentina, they will have different names. And one of the things that's great is now, it used to be hard to do this, but now you can just go on the internet and say, names from Argentina, last names from Argentina, first names from Argentina, boys' names from Argentina, girls' names from Argentina. You'll get these huge lists. A lot of them are bullshit, but you'll get an idea. The other thing you can do is, I like to just go through the end credits of big movies, like Marvel movies, because they have over 1,000 names in the credits, and they have interesting names. And so what I do is I just pull some names that I think are interesting and I make a pile. But the important thing is to split the first name and the last name. You cannot use an existing person's name, because then you're saying this character is this person, and this person can say, well, hey, I didn't murder anybody like their character did. So always split do not ever borrow a first name and a last name. Borrow a first name or a last name. Is that making sense, Million Diamonds? And then the answer is just try to make a scrap pile. I talked about that a little earlier. Brainstorming and scrap piles. Look at that video. I talk about making piles of names so that you just have something to work from. And then you just kind of make them up. Is 27 too late to begin in the film business? No. It depends on where you are, and it depends on what you want to do in the film biz. But it is not too late to create films. It is not too late at all. You are welcome, Ad Hoc. Yes, Altman's films break. Altman's films I would not necessarily recommend as an example of strategic script building. He's got great ensemble films, but they are structurally often a mess, which is cool. But actually, if you want to see how to do multiple storylines, Love Actually, the script for Love Actually and the movie Love Actually, dynamite work in interweaving storylines. Yay, Eva and Kestrel are getting along. Yay, giving each other help. I love when you guys help each other. What are you thinking of narrative stories? I think that they are a good possibility of storytelling. I think that there is no rule to say you can't do it. You have to do it well. It has to be entertaining. You have to be careful that the narration is not repeating the thing you are looking at. There should be some difference, some reason that you have both a narrator and a thing that you're looking at. The narrator could be telling you things that you can't see, or the narrator can be giving you information about what they're intending. Or the narration can be wrong, which is kind of fun. Very often the narration is simply an opinion. For instance, Blood Simple, the main narrator is in fact misinformed in many ways. In a previous AMA, you said you prefer being in control of everything concerning the story. Has there ever been, how do actors factor in? Has there ever been a great moment when a new angle starts materializing? Honestly, as far as story goes, no. Usually by the time you get actors involved, you've written out the story. I find it would be difficult when you have actors involved, especially if you're shooting. If you're shooting something, you've got to get that day's work done. And you can't stop and make up a new story. The way that actors factor in is that they do things differently than you thought. So when I say control of the story, I don't mean micromanaging how people do their stuff. What I mean is, I personally, yeah, I do. It took me, actually, this took me about 20 years of learning directing, because actors is really a director's problem. By the time the script gets to actors, most of the work is being guided by the director. Yes, there will be rewrites to fit certain actors and to take into account things that actors want, but that's not going to be the whole story. Example of this, actually, interesting. When I was working on Mad Money, that took many drafts, working with many people, advising and stuff, and it was based on an existing story. But still, we came up with the script. We did they cast it. They actually did a reading with a different cast, just like to hear it out loud. They got all these actors and they did it. It was really cool. And then a year or two later, they finally cast it. So we had our first read through with the cast of the movie. And afterwards, Ted Danson, who played Diane Keaton's husband, the story was about three women, and so he was a supporting character to the main woman. He said, it kind of bothers me, not bothers me like it bothers me storytelling wise, that my character and my wife's character we never see them why their love works, because we're seeing them in a crisis time. They're having a lot of arguments, but we're not seeing how they're good together. And Callie Corey and the director and I both thought, he's right. It's right. We forgot to let the audience see the strength of the relationship because we were too busy watching the relationship get threatened. So we added a scene, a really good scene, about this couple starting, they're working together and they're in a car and they find themselves falling in love with each other and getting turned on to each other during the course of this caper. But the point is that scene didn't exist until the actor mentioned, he's like, my character is a good character, but there's a piece of him that's not showing. And because every actor simply looks at the script through their point of view, he noticed a legitimate hole in the big picture. Other times you get actors who are like, oh, could I do a scene with water skiing? And you're like, nah, we can't do that. Okay. So last few I got here. I don't know if this is off topic. I was wondering what do you know about public domain and how adapting from it should be handled. It's an interesting question. The answer is simple. If it's in the public domain, take it away. That's the point. That is the definition of public domain. Public domain is, it depends on what country you are in and the copyright laws in that country. However, in America, and you should look on the internet, use your search engines to research copyright laws in your country. Fill in the blank there. Don't just say your country. State your name. It's an old joke from an old movie. Public domain means it is no longer copyright. It is anyone can take it and do whatever they want with it. You can actually take a book that is in the public domain, print up your version of it, and sell it. You have that right. It is for things that are over 75 to 100 years old in America. And so the answer is, if you are working with something in public domain, you do not have to use credit. You don't have to tell anyone you're using it. You could, in theory, the one thing you can't do is put your name on it. Like, I don't think you could just take The Great Gatsby and put your name on it and sell it and say, I wrote The Great Gatsby. But I do believe that you could write like an adaptation of The Great Gatsby at this point, because it just came out of copyright, went into public domain. In theory, you could do it, I believe. Look this up. Wait, this is really, really important. This is not legal advice. I am not a lawyer. You cannot go and do something without checking for yourself with the internet and a lawyer and find out, because I do not want you to later get sued and say, Glenn said it was okay. I am telling you right now, this is not legitimate legal advice. It's very important that you know that. However, it is my understanding that if you are working, for instance, with Shakespeare, you can take King Lear and make your own version of King Lear, and you can do it. You're allowed. Okay, I've heard the story about writers typing the script into the audio queue while the show was being shot. Yes, absolutely. There have been times. There have been times when actors have improvised. There have been times when directors have said, "Oh, let's do this." And there are certain, if you are rich and famous enough and powerful enough, you can, as many very, very privileged writers can do, have said, "Okay, I'm going to stop the shoot and have 80 people sit around while I rewrite this scene." It does happen. I would just advise you not to depend on that being a thing. John Cassavetes, yes, influenced filmmakers using friends, no constraints, shooting. Yes, absolutely. John Cassavetes, very, very important. Please look him up. I personally have a hard time watching some of these things that are very influential and groundbreaking, but I like watching them to steal their technique, even though I do not love their writing or storytelling often. I find a lot of John Cassavetes films hard to watch all of, but I love watching little 10, 15-minute sections, I'll tell you that. Anyway, do characters' names need to mean something, or is that considered corny nowadays? No, they don't. You can, if you want, but it's not a question of corny, it's just a question of not required. Also remember, a lot of people won't know it, so don't worry about it. What is the point of copyright if you can just renew them? You can only renew them a certain amount. You can't renew them past I think it's 75 years. I think it's like a 25-year and then you get another 50. The point is, at a certain point, you cannot renew copyright anymore. Is Sherlock Holmes the public domain? Yes. Even if films have already been created. It depends. Be careful about this. There are films that are in the public domain because they are so old that they're almost all silent films. I believe that now some of the first sound films are coming out of copyright. But the answer is yes. If it is a film, and once again, this is not legal advice. I do not know whether or not, I believe you can even use clips from a film that is no longer in copyright, and you can do it. I don't know what that means, but I'm glad. Thank you for the the 3 boxes. Listen, this has been a blast, but my time is up. I must return to my cage, and I will talk to you next Tuesday. Yes, yeah, Sherlock Holmes, some great storytelling there. Some good stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff that is not in copyright, that is in the public domain. Corman used to, yes, Roger Corman and some other people, and in fact, there's I think 1 or 2 TV shows that have actually bought the rights and dubbed foreign films. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so all of you, have yourselves a fabulous weekend, and I will see you next Tuesday. And in the meantime, go write something.